Yeah, great. Hello, everybody who watches these afterward. I hope your week was great. Um, so I've been thinking about these Saturday classes. I love text. As you know, I read a lot of the root text, and it means a lot to me. I love to teach the root text. Additionally, I've been creating things for other scenarios that are a little less text-based and more like hyper practical. Like I taught this really fun class this week called How to Bend Time, which was really, did you go to that, Becky? Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. I had a lot of, it was pretty joyful to do that. And it was more like direct application, less like theory. So I'm curious about where you guys are and how I can serve best with these Saturdays. Because even though I love to read old texts, that does not mean that everybody is going to serve them. So I wanted to do a little bit of listening this morning to hear about your practice. And now that you've seen some of the different things that I can offer, how would you like to spend these Saturdays? Continue? Would you like to see something different?
Okay, I'll start. Um, I would love to continue. I'm a big nerd and I love the
Nice.
content that you've been teaching so far. But I also love everything else you teach. So I'm open to anything that you feel
Okay.
called to teach us.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of asking you if there's anything we could learn about the subtle body. I may or may not be the only non-Lady Naguma um, master here. And so for me, it's like fascinating and totally interesting. But
Yeah,
all that
cool.
said, I'm game to continue as is, or if you
Cool.
decide to change. And my practice has been good. I've been like just soaking everything in and trying to trying to grow.
Well, thank you so much for your feedback, Becky. Sophie?
Yeah, I would like to continue. I'm pretty open to any subject, and yeah, I've been loving whatever you was teaching before, so it's a great knowledge. And yeah, if we do some fun subjects, like random one, it will be like a great mix too. I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
I didn't watch the Zoom yesterday. I need to catch up with that. Is it the you have a recording, right? I think on that
Uh,
about
I
the timing.
yeah, I think it wasn't my program. It was a fundraiser for somebody else that I did.
Um,
So, I don't know if they'll have it recorded. I can follow up and ask. Um,
oh yeah, thank you.
it
Yeah, I
was a lot
didn't
of it was
have
a
a
lot of
chance
fun.
to be during like the timing, but yeah, something like that I'll be open to it too because it's like a
Okay.
everyday things we everybody face. But
Yeah.
so it's definitely will be a cool thing to hear from your perspective
Yeah,
and
cool.
share your knowledge.
Nice. Thanks for the feedback. Um, yeah, it was this
And
really
my
Mhm.
sorry, go
Sorry?
ahead.
No, I was just gonna give you the in case you never get the recording, I'll give you just the one-liner version of it, which is um oftentimes we bend ourselves to time, thinking that time is a certain kind of way. I don't have enough time, or time goes too fast. And so we change our behavior to do things that don't reflect our heart in order to fit ourselves into time. So we
Mhm.
treat time like it's unchanging mountain and we're a river that bends around it. But the reality is that if we were to be unwavering in our commitment to our ethics, time begins to bend around us. And that was one of the things I played with in my retreat. And I'm very, very passionate now about sharing that, about what I learned and what I experienced directly with that. And it's just really, really special. So, the key takeaway was go from worried time slave to abundant time bender by being unwavering with living your ethics. So never think that being late gives you permission to drive recklessly and put other people in danger. It'll never create the life that you want. Whereas if you just took care of other people while you drove slowly and you were late, then very strange and unexpected things happen in your life, including, oh, the meeting was delayed 15 minutes and you're not late anymore. Like that kind of stuff happens all the time. And it often is as a response to you taking the first stand of confidence that you want to be a certain kind of way. And then the world shifts itself around that image. So that was the whole, 45-minute class. And, I gave a lot of points about that. So anyway, just in case it never gets to you, there it is.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's such a great thought of it.
Cool.
I do.
I didn't mean to
Yeah.
cut you off though. Continue.
I was also. I would say the meditation that I don't do it every day, but definitely I try to do it a few times a week
Hmm.
and remember about it. Sorry, I have my friends here.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I try to remember it and like do it more often. So it's been going well, more than usual.
Yeah, good. Great. Well, it sounds
Yeah,
like
the
it's been
easiest part
useful
for
while you're
me
working on.
it's always as like after practice, like put more thoughts into it afterward.
Yeah, cool. All right. Cool. And Paul, not to exclude you, but if you'd like to jump in, feel free. Otherwise, you're all good.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm stoked to be here. Recently, I think I said in the text to you that, I've really been having a calling to sort of develop and cultivate more of my internal experience. And it's been an interesting time in in my career right now where I'm being very reflective on what I've done. And just so you guys know,
Mhm.
I have a career that's been very heavily intuitively led. It's been really fun and interesting and connects with me in a lot of different ways, but Bob texted me like about Spiritual Warrior right at a time when I was really digging into some of these questions and then reading a lot of the Substack posts and watching some of your videos. You're really hammering into a lot of questions that I've been
Mhm.
really contemplating on lately.
Mhm.
So between that and like I said, my call to build my internal practice, I've been meditating much more, basically just the preliminaries from that YSI course. Um,
Nice. Yeah, cool.
like really, really trying to build that like it feels like it almost feels like a physical skill in some ways, right? Like there's like
Oh,
an element
for
of training
sure.
to it that's like really interesting. So whenever we spend some time doing yoga or meditating, it's always a really interesting experience. I feel like there's such a great depth of stuff to get into. So I'm really open to wherever this goes. I'm excited to be here with you guys all today. But that's kind of the time in my life that this is beginning. So
Yeah. Paul, would you be willing to share? You said there's a couple questions that have been coming up. Are they shareable?
yeah, sure. So just Sophie and Becky, to give you guys some context, I sort of work in the government world, state government, in a really obscure realm of transportation, dedicated
Mhm.
to like traffic safety, walking, biking, and urban growth. And it's been a really, really interesting career, but I'm sort of grappling with some of these questions of like, why am I doing this? Like it feels like
Yeah, cool.
I have a lot of intuition and insight that leads me right into the path to get done exactly what I want to do, or not convince is the wrong word, but there's an element of convincing people what I'm trying to do and work with
Sure.
them on is not is something beneficial. So that is really exciting, but there's part of me that's like, how much of this is just material and power seeking and drinking from the sweet cup of power and not actually serving myself or others? And is this material effort really something that's worth putting all of this energy into? Um, and I'm like, is this just a hobby? Am I doing this because it's fun? Or is this something that really connects with who I am? And what part of it's connecting with who I am? Does that
Yes.
make sense?
Dude, 100 billion%. That is literally my favorite nexus. Like, that is my playground. So cool. Thanks for sharing. By the way, Paul, did you read the fourth Dune book?
The God Emperor?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Lord Leto would be very appreciative of
he,
the
he
question that
would.
you're asking right
He
now.
would. Yeah, I mean,
I
hey,
just finished that one, by the way.
a
It was
lot of these
amazing.
thoughts are somewhat inspired by him, and a lot of people who I've read who've talked about even just political philosophy and the
Yeah.
nature of power, right? It really makes you wonder, like, oh,
Yeah, totally.
is this just like this human folly, this effort that I'm endeavoring into, or is this something that's really like a hard-aligned effort that I'm called to in a genuine way?
Yeah, cool. Um, awesome. Well, thank you. Let's go ahead and get started. Paul, I hold your question in my heart. It is a question that I seek to answer literally every day of my life. You know what I mean? Because I think it's a question to ask every single day. Because yesterday is not the same as today, right? And I'm not the same person I was yesterday. Like the thing about me more than anything is that I change. And to think of it any other way would be a misunderstanding. So we got to take it fresh. And I'm so glad that I uh I caught Lord Leto's voice in your By the way, Paul and I nerd out on fun books. Uh the Dune series, for example, is just like phenomenal. Becky, have you read the Dune series? Oh my gosh. Just the first one? Nice. I just finished the fourth one on the drive back from Michigan, and it was just beyond epic and excellent. And by the way, he talks about samadhi, which is the Sanskrit word for perfect meditation. So that author is very suspicious. Um, so I've been like wanting to share this, and I haven't known where, but it's here. One of the things that this God Emperor says, and this is going to parlay into what we'll talk about today, by the way. I promise, but I got to get it out now. So in the story, there's this like incredibly powerful being named Lord Leto. And Lord Leto has like a right-hand man. And uh the right-hand man has a daughter. It's his only daughter. And Lord Leto, this like 3,500-year-old like worm god, you know, uh he tests every single person that's in, you know, his administration or something like that, to see how they engage with power, and among other things. And so not everybody lives through the test. And so his right-hand man's daughter is about to get the test, and the right-hand man goes, I'm just so nervous because it's my only child. As if Lord Leto didn't feel the same kind of affection toward his right-hand man's daughter as the right-hand man did about his daughter. And Lord Leto goes, you fool, that's your only child. All beings are my only child. And that was like, that is the attitude of a bodhisattva. You fool. You think I have preference between beings? All beings are my only child. Whoa, imagine if we lived that way. How would we be in this world? And in fact, to prefer my child over your child, or my X over your Y, is the very beginning of suffering. Because it begins a division that we believe is true, which functionally is true, but ultimately is not. Is my hand five fingers, or is my hand one hand? Right? It's both. Like my hand is both five fingers and one hand. And so ultimately, I have this whole, but then I imply a division upon the whole. Functionally, there is divisions of five fingers on one whole. That is a very functional thing. I say thumb, everybody knows what thumb is. But where does the thumb end? Right? Is it here? 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 Okay, well, it's at the end of the cartilage. And you're like, okay, great. Where's the end of the cartilage? Oh, well, it's right there. And you're like, wow, okay, it's just a molecule, right? That's the end of the. And you're like, well, that's not even. Okay, it's a single nucleus and an electron. And you're like, wow, if you try to observe electrons, it's kind of problematic, you know. So then you go, okay, well, it's the cloud of electrons. And you're like, well, it's a cloud of electrons. It's not an actual electron. So if you try to find it, you couldn't pinpoint it in a GPS location. Where is the edge of the thumb? You're like, okay, well, it's at the electron at the moment when it's at the furthest away from the nucleus. And you go, okay, great. But the problem is electron, you can still divide an electron, right? So what part of the electron is the edge of the thumb? So it becomes extremely abstract, and then you get to quantum physics, which says that as soon as you try to perceive a quark, it's unperceivable. So where the hell is the end of your thumb? Right? It's just an implied image that came from you that has function but is not ultimately true. And so where does the thumb end and the forefinger meet? Like where does one become the other? If you try to find the edge between one thing and another, you'll find that you could never objectively find it anywhere except in your own perception. And so when I say I prefer my child over yours, functionally, obviously, my child is not your child. Clearly, like this one came out of my wife, that one came out of your partner. Like, obviously, there's a functional differentiation, but ultimately, to decide to treat my child differently than your child in terms of who deserves my love is just a mental image that has been habituated into my mind stream. It is not something that is objectively found. And so, if it is true that our perception of individuation and distinction is nothing more than a mental habit, is not an objective, findable fact, then what are the implications of that? You fool! All of humanity is my, all sentient beings are my only child. What if we could feel that way, right? What would the world be like? How would we feel? How would we be like? Like, it's just a really interesting meditation. And then you decide whether you think that's worthwhile or not. I've been working really hard for the last 2 months to convince you that it is. But ultimately, you have to come to it through your own investigation. All right, let's get into slides. Thank you, Lord Leto. Appreciate it. Shout out, Homeboy Worm. Um, let's see. Can you see? It's all good. You can see a big badass lion. Cool. Dancing with Lions. That's the series we're working through. Upcoming events. Next, Fast for Hunger. This is the only upcoming event that I have right now. I'm trying to figure out what to do with Spiritual Warrior. Um, I really want to help a lot of people. Trying to figure out the best way to do that. So Alexa and I are having a lot of fun figuring out how we can do that. So as of right now, these are upcoming events. I said this before, I'll say it again. Something that really helps me is when people ask me to teach. So Becky, thank you so much, because then I know there's an infinity of things that I can share, but that's too many. So it really helps when someone's like, oh, this is what would be helpful in my life. And I was like, okay, great. I really believe that I can share. So upcoming thing is next is Fast for Hunger, July 24th, and we're going to be doing compassion meditation at 12 p.m. What's really cool about this is that it's an external practice to have an internal experience of what we just spoke about. Like, why is feeding myself more important to me than feeding other people? Like, what if I saw them as equally important? How would I be? And so, causes and conditions. It's important to plant causes, but also to create the conditions for thoughts to arise is a really important component of creating a life that's the life that we want. Many of us who have studied karma and seeds and causes, we get that drilled into us. Causes, 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 causes. Stop fighting effects. Start making causes, right? The cement is already dried. You're not going to be able to change it. Pour new cement. Stop fighting the result. Start creating new causes. And that is a very wise way to live. But another thing that we need to consider is that causes cannot arise without conditions. A seed is a cause for a plant, but without the without the conditions of soil and water, that seed won't sprout. And so someone who practices yoga The literal act of moving your body in that kind of way with breath and mind in unity, that is a set of conditions for causes to arise and a set of conditions for new causes to be planted in a way that's radically powerful. So you can think of that external method of asana as being very intentional about the condition of your being. And so when we fast, we're creating different conditions for us to plant different causes. And what I find is that empathy is extraordinary. And one of the definitions of empathy is shared experience. Like I can intellectually empathize with you, but if I can experientially empathize with you, it's so powerful, which is one of the reasons why we should be rejoicing when we suffer. Because you're a spiritual warrior. You know how to get through it, right? And I'll help you. Like, I believe me, we can do it. And by experiencing this deep suffering, I can be more useful to others because now I can experientially empathize with them and guide them instead of just intellectually empathize and guide them. And so when we fast and we force ourselves into the state of hunger out of choice, then we can more closely empathize with those who have no choice but to be hungry, which I think really lights the fire of compassionate action by creating those conditions. And then here's a little subtle body training for you, Becky. The Samana Vayu is the collection of prana that is responsible for digestion. It's in the abdomen area. And the aspect of prana in the body is that think of it as like there's a fixed amount of prana in the body. And so you get to choose where it goes and what it does. And because thoughts and prana run together, when you are digesting, a lot of the prana is running in your GI, in your gastrointestinal system. When you're fasted, your samana vayu does not need to be responsible for digestion and extracting essence. It can be available for other kinds of things, which is really interesting. When you meditate fasted, when you do your asana fasted, the way that you're able to, if you've done the work of developing the relationship of directing prana intentionally, your capacity to intentionally direct prana is so much more profound because it's not locked up in, a certain kind of biological function. It's available for some spiritual pursuit. And so the capacity to have very clear thoughts on the nature of hunger, for example, uh, it's much more sharp and clear with much more conscious power. And those of you who are doing our how to meditate class, one of the things we aim to do after we've learned how to focus is to increase the capacity of our consciousness. So it's like going from a candle to a laser beam. Like, okay, we have light consistently, great. We have trained focus. The next thing is now to make it more powerful. And so by putting more prana available for meditation, then you're able to step up the capacity for insight because that laser beam becomes something that ablates illusion because it's so much more powerful that illusion can't stand the piercing edge of insight. Great. So, Fast for Hunger, July 24th. Okay, let's get into class today. Start with a question. Why do Buddhists care so much about compassion? Gosh, Bob, I feel like every single week you just keep talking about compassion. Well, why do Buddhists care so much about compassion? Not rhetorical. Becky, I'm calling on you. No one is safe here. I'm just kidding. Everyone's safe, but you will be called on.
I think, okay, I can't really articulate it well, but I think because bodhicitta is one of the ingredients to make your meditation stronger for direct perception of emptiness, maybe.
Wow, very technical definition. Very good. What is bodhicitta?
Oh no, now my mind went to the easiest one.
No, come on, you got it. Just don't worry about being accurate. Just speak from your heart.
It's the wish for all beings to not suffer,
Nice.
the wish to relieve the suffering for all beings.
Yeah, upgrade it a little bit. You're not wrong, but there's a little bit more upgrade. How could you do that? Turn it from a
For
wish
you
to a
to be the one
reality.
who takes them out of suffering.
Yeah, good. May I become enlightened for the sake of all beings, so that I can destroy suffering and all of its causes for all beings. Right? So why is that a cause? Why is that compassionate thought a cause for impeccable meditation? All right, let's catch the flow. This is what we've been working through. So let's see. So we're working through a text called the Bhavanakrama, written in around 700 AD by Kamalashila. It's called Stages of Meditation. And that's how a lot of people translate it. I want to have a lot of fun with it. Scholars might shirk at what I'm about to do, but krama means like kra is the same root as kr, which is in karma or create. So it's like to become. And then bhavana means meditation, but it also means to become. So I was just thinking about a really fun way to say bhavana krama is the becoming of becoming, or becoming becoming. I really like that. But it's typically translated as the stages of meditation. So we're working through that text. So this is the logic flow of the text so far, and then where we are leaving off today. So number one, omniscience helps us help all beings. If I don't know how to help you, I can't help you. Omniscience is to know all things. And so if I really wanted to help somebody, then it would be very useful to be omniscient. So the first part of the text is basically an ode to omniscience, being like, here's why it would be useful and why that's something that is worth aspiring to. Now, omniscience is a pretty audacious big goal, right? To be able to be aware of all of things independent of space and time, like outside of space and time, across space and time. So number two is, well, omniscience is a produced thing. Because it is a perception, that means that there's a perceiver, which means that that experience is a production. It's a result. To have a perception which is omniscient is something which is produced. To have a perception at all is a result. And every single produced thing has a cause. Every single result has a cause. So by logic, omniscience has a cause. Can I cause it? Totally different story. But to admit that omniscience is a perception is to admit that it is a result, because a perception is a result. And to admit that something is a result is also to admit that there must have been a cause, because there's no such thing as a result without a cause. Therefore, omniscience can be developed. And we can see this in microstructure of yesterday, I didn't know as much as I did today. My consciousness has developed. Because omniscience is simply the ultimate develop. It's the word which describes the ultimately developed consciousness. As I'm more aware of more things, you would say that that is a consciousness which is more developed. A dog is equally conscious as I am. We are both conscious. But I have developed my consciousness more, which means I have more awareness. And every single day, I try to become more aware of more things until, at the end of the day, I become aware of all things, and my consciousness has been totally and completely developed into a state of perfection. So that is what it means, and therefore it can be developed. Because if you would agree that we can go from one to two, then you also must agree that you can go from two to infinity. So, how consciousness works, we must understand that if we want to understand how to develop consciousness. And so we understood that consciousness is simply a description of three factors in concert, the trinity of object, subject, and the instrument of perception. I, subject, see, instrument, a thing, object. That's consciousness. A moment of conscious perception is when a subject apprehends an object. There's no such thing as a subject without an object. There's no such thing as an object without a subject. And obviously, we need the instrument of perception, which is the mind. That's how consciousness works. What we see doesn't come from out there. What we see comes from a seed, which splits into the duality of subject and object. Now, when we place our consciousness on a support, because consciousness is supported, consciousness needs a thing to be supported upon. The subject rests upon the object. So what makes a valid or an invalid support of consciousness? Very interesting, important question. It's like a bridge whose pillars are faulty versus a bridge. You might remember that image that we did. The pillars, which will inevitably crumble, will never be a bridge which gets you to the other side. Does anybody remember the Sanskrit for getting to the other side? It's the perfections. We did this on June 21st. Paramita. So param is like comes into like parameter or perimeter. So it's like the outermost edge, which or it means the other side. And then ita means to go. So paramita, which is a perfection, is to get to the other side. So how do we get to the other side? We need a bridge. And the bridge needs supports. A bridge without supports doesn't work. You might start, but as soon as you start to put load on it, it'll crumble because the basis of the support is invalid. When we believe that things exist inherently, that is an invalid support of consciousness. And because we have that belief that cookies are good from their own side, money is good from their own side, power is bad from its own side. You know, my wife is really amazing from her own side. Those are all invalid supports because they're not true. And anything which is cultured on a media which is invalid will never thrive. It will run its course and it will fade because that media is limited. You can't culture infinite consciousness on a medium which is limited or an invalid media. It'll run a course for a little bit, but it'll peter out. Just like the first cookies may be really delicious, but the 10th one's no longer delicious. You're like, oh my God, please stop. And you're like, no, eat another cookie. And you're like, it hurts, But you're like, but I thought cookies were good, and it's like invalid, So consciousness, which is developed on a belief that there's an inherent reality, independent of your perception of it, that's not how consciousness works. Therefore, it could never be a valid support of infinite consciousness. The valid support, which supports an infinite development of consciousness, a consciousness which expands infinitely, and Becky, you might start to recognize this language with the formless realm meditations we did. Right? So the first formless realm meditation was infinite expansion of consciousness. And then the second formless realm was infinite awareness. How do you get there? By having a valid support, which means a valid understanding of how consciousness works, which is things are empty. And my perception of them comes from me, they don't come from them. So that's how consciousness works, and that's the difference between valid and invalid perceptions. Therefore, we train our mind to perceive things accurately because we are so often perceiving things inaccurately. We think things are the way they are in a way which they could never be. Cookies are good. Inaccurate. You think that you experience cookies as good right now, right? But that can change. And so we have to train our mind because that's how you develop a mind, is by training the mind to have valid perceptions, to perceive things accurately. And the definition of an accurate perception is perceiving things in a way which is consistent with how they actually are. The definition of meditation is seeing things as they are, not seeing them as your projections. How much injustice do we feel when people say that, oh, Bob, you're X. And you're like, man, that's just your projection. That is so unfair, man. Like, that's not how I am. That's how you see me, but that's not how I am. You're bringing your own trash to, to my party. Like, get your garbage out of my can. You're, our job is to see the world as it is in its pure state, not the way that we make it. We must see it as both, though. That's a long story. And the image that I shared with that, you might remember the image of the moon reflecting on the lake. Right? There would be no reflection of the moon on the lake without a moon, and there would be no moon if there was no reflection of the moon. So we need to see both how we see things and the ultimate nature of things, because the two are interdependent and they exist in tandem. To take one away would be it's an impossibility. So we can't reject the ways that we see things. We just have to understand the truth that's behind the way we see things, so that we can really see the truth of apparent reality in yoga with ultimate reality, or in union with ultimate reality. If we were to be able to see things in the way that they are, instead of the way that we wish they were, or the way that we think they are, then it's so much easier to live meaningfully, because to live a lie is to live in suffering. If I just got that promotion, I would be happy. Really? Maybe. Maybe not. Is the promotion the cause of your happiness? So what people do, and one of my favorite blog posts was Sharply Meaningless Blade. We become excellent at meaningless things because the process of sharpening is very pleasant, because we have the perception of progress, but it's spiritually unfulfilling. And so we spend our lives preparing and battling in wars which are meaningless, only to get to the end of our life and say, what the hell did I just spend my whole life on? And so to see things in the way that they are helps us to live more meaningfully, because we're not caught in the illusion. We're not caught thinking that the movie is a real thing. We're not caught thinking that the magician's act is truth. We can be entertained by them, and it's actually much more enjoyable when we're able to enjoy the illusion, right? We don't reject the illusion, we just understand it. And then we use the illusion as the very fuel for liberation, because we understand that we are the creators of the illusion and the perceivers of illusion. So then you get to create the movie and enjoy the movie all at the same time, knowing that you're not in the movie. Right? Don't punch the movie screen thinking that you're going to get rid of bad people. Like, that would be very foolish of you. You wouldn't be seeing things as they are. You're like, oh, I see a bad guy on the screen. Oh, I saw in the news today a bad guy did a bad thing. And then you punch your phone. Like, come on. Like, that's not going to change anything. Be different, make different stories, and then revel in the bliss of the wisdom which understands the nature of the news story that came up on your phone. Because just that understanding is very, very, very meaningful. So then we got to last week's class, which was, if we can live meaningfully, what does it mean to live meaningfully? And we talked about milking cow horns. How many people do we see who try to draw milk from a cow's horn, and then they're very excited because it feels like they're taking action, and action feels pleasant, but they don't realize that they're just getting a bunch of blisters, and they're like, yeah, look at my life, like, look how much action I'm taking. You're like, dude, that's the horn, that's not the udder, right? Because we haven't learned how to see things the way that they are. And so, what does it mean to live meaningfully? The definition of living meaningfully is to be moved by compassion, according to the school of Buddhism. See things. Once you see things as they are, a couple of things happen. Number one is that you can't help but be moved by compassion, because that is the only thought that can run on the prana which sees things as they are. When you're in truth, the only karma that can open in the mind which perceives truth, the wind is blowing in a way where the only thoughts which could open are compassionate thoughts. So you are obligated. There's no other option. And, take it for what it's worth. We could give 6 months of courses on why that works. But for today's, just put it on the shelf if you don't buy it. Don't throw it away though. To live meaningfully means to perceive things as they are, and then to be moved by compassion, because that's the only way that you could be. And what would that look like? That would look like the six perfections, and that was the topic of last class. And those are the paramitas: giving, ethics, forgiveness or forbearance, or the art of not getting angry is the third one. Fourth one is joyful effort, which is getting really excited about living well, doing hard work. That's extremely meaningful and beautiful, which then brings us to the final perfections, which are meditation and wisdom. Okay, so those are the six perfections, and that's what gets us to a perfected mind. So, where do we go today? If that is what it means, we just defined what it means. Now, let's begin. Right? So, the last 2 weeks were all about the principles and the theory. Sorry, the last 2 months were all about the principle and the theory as to why at all we should meditate, number one. Number two, what we should meditate on, which is compassion. Compassion is the beginning, the middle, sorry. Compassion is the root, the beginning, the middle, and the end of the Buddhist path. Really beautiful. And I'll just briefly say that it's just nice to reiterate things, especially considering how much content we've covered. It's nice to hear things again. And maybe you're hearing this for the first time. The root is compassion, because that is the foundation upon which all of valid perceptions can be perceived. And it's the beginning because we start by developing compassion. It's the middle because we do the six perfections, which are the embodiment of compassion. And it's the end because how would a Buddha live? Compassionately. So it's like the whole dang thing. So compassion is. And then I gotta tie this around from my buddy Paul here. And for anybody who watches this in the distant future on my Ixion Crystal notes here. I'm just kidding. Well, that's a Dune reference. My favorite reasoning as to why compassion is the root is because if we think about the experience of being an enlightened being, it is a being who is in an unending stream of unmatchable bliss. And if we were to use a different language, it's a little easier to wrap our minds around. It's not suffering, right? Like just feeling really nice, like just not suffering, like feeling totally liberated, totally free. And so the opposite of that is suffering. And so if we were to make it a way of life to relieve the suffering of other people, what would the result of those causes be? We would see ourselves relieved of suffering. by helping relieve others of suffering. And what is the nth degree of not suffering? It's being a Buddha. It's being a totally enlightened being. It's achieving the goal of yoga. And so by helping others to relieve their suffering, those are the causes for us to be in a state which knows no suffering. And the description of a mind which is in that state is a mind of omniscience. Kind of cool, right? Now, the nuance of that is supreme, which is why it's a practice which hopefully only takes one lifetime, but has taken lifetimes to at least get to today. So, what do we do? Develop compassion, starting with its root, equanimity. Compassion is one of the major causes for realizing a mind which is incapable of having a negative thought. So, how do we develop that attitude? That is the question which brings us in today's class. And now that we're an hour in, let's begin today's class. Man, I think I am my teacher's student. Thank you, teachers. So, here's the next part of the root text that we're working through. The way to meditate on compassion will be taught from the outset. Begin with the practice of meditating on equanimity. Try to actualize impartiality toward all sentient beings by eliminating attachment and hatred. So, we've done all of this. What is it? How's it work? Why are we doing it? Why does it make sense? So all of that, because if we don't understand what we're doing, it's very difficult to do something. Right? The practice of Buddhism requires that you understand what you're doing to some degree. If you don't have an understanding of doing it, of why you're doing it and what you're doing, then the benefits will be paltry compared to what's the potential. So that's why we build all of these huge logical frameworks and cause and effects relationships, and so that we can get to this part. Now we're getting into the how. The way to meditate on compassion will be taught from the outset. Great. Begin the practice by meditating on equanimity. That's how we start. But we're actually not going to do that today because we have to spend a little bit more time defining compassion. So when we say be compassionate, what does that mean? So, as with any good commentary of any good root text, we've already defined meditation. So we have to get the next key term, which is compassion, before we can get to begin the practice. So we've defined meditation as the habituation of the mind. That's meditation. Meditation is familiarization of the mind on an object. That's meditation. And what we're trying to familiarize ourselves on is seeing things as they are. We're trying to see the truth. That's what we're familiarizing our mind on. How we do that is the purpose of the next 18 months of this series, which we're starting today, of the how. But the next word is compassion, so let's get into it. Here's the definition of compassion. Compassion is a mind. First of all, recognize the import of that statement. Compassion is a mind which perceives a suffering being and wishes them to be free of suffering and its causes. So this was written as one sentence, but I broke it. I added the line breaks because each one of these lines is a complete teaching, I think. We're not going to do it that way, though. But if you wanted to meditate on how each one of these phrases is profound, go for it. It's so, like, compassion is a mind. What? Think about it. Which perceives. Yeah, okay. What does it perceive? A suffering being. Okay, so we're going to get into a little bit of that perception today. And then we talked last week about the wish. And then we talked a little bit about what it means to be free. And then we didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about suffering and its causes. We talked about it very loftily about valid and invalid perceptions. Okay. Oh, I have to sell being kind. All right, here's my sales pitch. You should be kind. Here's why. Here's the value of being kind. It's great. Every single Buddhist text is a sales presentation. Swear to God, it's amazing. The first thing you got to do is sell what you're selling and then explain it. Kindness is obvious even to animals. Like, kindness is obvious, period. Even to animals. An animal can perceive kindness, and then they have affection toward it or aversion to it. Petting a dog. Dogs freaking love that. Hitting a dog. Dogs freaking hate that. If you're someone who hits a dog, the dog's going to avoid you. The dog's going to be afraid of you, and you will be lonely because you won't have companionship. And the dog might even bite you, and now you're suffering. Like physically, not just emotionally. Petting a dog. You have companionship. Warm and fuzzies. Oh, that's nice. So it's obvious even to the mind of animal consciousness. That's how primordial the value of compassion is. And then for humans, it attracts friends. Kind people are delightful. Come on, of course. You know? And then people who sacrifice kindness in the pursuit of things find that things could never buy companionship or kindness. You can coerce people with money, but you can never purchase profound relationship. Only kindness can do that. And money makes a poor friend. Friendship within ourselves is perhaps one of the most attractive friendships that compassion brings, right? If we look at ourselves and we can't stand who we are, then we're not at peace. The light within ourselves can't shine because it's not shining. And so it's even friendship within ourselves, which we could never buy with money, obviously. Anybody who's, that doesn't take a lot of philosophy to prove. A kind and helpful heart is the very foundation of happiness for all beings. Yay! So I hope you've purchased kindness today. The two hands of developing compassion. Number one, developing loving kindness towards suffering beings. And number two, identifying the nature of suffering. And this will become the frontier through which we will meditate. Okay, so this is really important. When we say, the sixth point in our logical flow of the text is here's how. Okay, so you're like, okay, I buy being kind, I buy being compassionate, I understand why it's valuable, how it works, how it's going to help me help others and live a happy life. How do I do it, Bob? How do I do it, Kamala Shila? How do I do it, Lord Buddha? Two ways. Number one, develop loving kindness towards suffering beings. And number two, identify the nature of suffering. Okay? So we're going to talk about that today. And probably for the next several weeks, we're going to be unpacking what's behind this and how to really do it. Maintain this awareness. Awareness of these two things. Awareness of loving kindness towards suffering beings, which, guys, gosh darn, is the sweetest way to look at somebody. If you're just looking at somebody with total abandon of loving kindness, like, do you know how seen people feel? Do you know how easy it is to see people? Like, it's the best gift that you could ever give the clerk at the grocery store, let alone your partner, let alone your parents. And if you truly understood the nature of that experience, then it's extremely profound. So our job is to maintain this awareness of these two things, not only in meditation, but all day long, every day. And then we focus this awareness on infinite number of beings, on the infinite number of beings. this is what makes it an infinite power, is that we focus this awareness on infinite number of beings. In this way, you will be able to generate a strong wish that all of them gain freedom from suffering and its causes. And the life that's lived, that is the embodiment of that wish, is incredible. The wish for enlightenment for the sake of all beings could never be understated in how that will change your entire way of being. To hold that wish in your heart and in your mind all day is the most clarifying reagent that you could ever put into the alchemy of your being. The wish to be the being which could actually help all beings. It's so clarifying. Should I do this or should I do this? Well, is it consistent with my wish or not? Boom, decision made. It's so clear. Or at least it helps. So there's 3 focuses of, oh no, foci. There's 3 foci, right? Paul's that right? Because like you have a 3 anyway. The 3 focus. I'll go with this, because you have a locus and then you have loci. Anyway, the 3 focuses of compassion. Okay, and this is really, 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 really cool. If you want to see somebody as they are, right? You see it at the level of the sentient being, at the level of seeds, and at the level of emptiness. Okay, I forgot to change the previous slide. I wanted to change these. The content's still the same, but we're working from an obvious perception, which is I see the sentient being, to a hidden perception, which is understanding the emptiness of the being, to the deeply hidden perception, which is the seeds which have produced that being. And each one of these is a different aspect of wisdom. And we're going to take these apart. We'll start here. To see sentient being, seeds, and emptiness, although these are 3 focuses, it is the same kind of mind because it is focusing on the earnest desire to free beings from suffering. Okay? So these are the same in their wish. But what's different is the aspect or the level of reality we're perceiving in that moment, where there's obvious gross reality or hidden subtle reality or deeply hidden extremely subtle reality. Okay, so let's take it apart. The most obvious thing as we are carrying this wish and having the mind of compassion is the sentient being, which is this is the literal being that we're seeing. So it's my dog, it's my cat, it's that person, it's somebody else, it's me, it's the literal being. Like imagine that you just took it at face value. I see someone who's suffering. I'm not considering the causes or the emptiness of that being. I'm just seeing the being. I'm walking down the street and I see that homeless person, that person who's homeless. That's it. And to have compassion at that level already is profound, right? Because it's so heavy to allow ourselves to feel compassion because then we have to be present with the suffering of the world around us. And it's so overwhelming that we build walls around our hearts so that we don't have to feel the weight of compassion. But that is such a superficial way to live. It is a way that is intentionally disconnecting us from experience. And the job of a spiritual warrior is to become so powerful that we can be in blissful union with the heaviness of experience and engage with that in joyful effort. Be like, yeah, man, this is where I play, like is not playful in the fact that like I'm pumped on everything I see, but it's playful in the fact that this is the medium through which I am the artist. Is the totality of experience, unabridged. Because I have the courage of being open. I am not the coward which closes myself off. Which, don't get overwhelmed and destroy yourself. Like you have to work into it. But that is the pursuit of the spiritual warriors. That is the strength that we're developing. The clarity which understands and the strength to bear it, and then the wisdom to transform it. Man, I'm gonna have to turn that into some marketing content. All right. Emptiness then is the next level. And emptiness is hidden. And this is to see, we're not excluding the sentient being. We're seeing the sentient being. And in addition, we're understanding their lack of self-existence. Now, this is really important. So you see the sentient being and you say, wow, that breaks my heart. My partner's suffering, or that guy on the street is suffering. I understand two really, really important aspects of this. Number one is that their state is impermanent. My perception of them is impermanent because they're empty, which means moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment, they're changing. Because I understand their emptiness. So we're not asking what causes the change yet. We're not asking why we're perceiving it the way that we are. We're not at that level. We're just simply understanding the ultimate nature of that perception, which is that it is empty of any inherent existence, any objective reality. Dude, what if that homeless person is like, I'm living the life? Like, who are we to say? Like, we don't know what they're experiencing in their reality. Like, it's empty, which means that two people can perceive it totally differently. How many times have we seen someone and we're like, man, you're really suffering? And they're like, dude, what are you talking about? This is awesome. I was talking to a ultra marathon runner yesterday, and she's like, that sounds awful. And they're like, it's total bliss. I was like, damn. Like things are empty. I don't know what you're experiencing, but from where I stand, that looks awful. Like you got poop running down your legs, like your nipples are bleeding. Like that does not seem like pleasant. And they're like, it's the best. And you're like, cool, 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 cool. So things are empty. Uh, so then we have to then see the most deeply hidden reality, which is that we see the being, we understand the lack of the self-existence of that being, and we understand that that being is a result of my own karma. We see the truth that they come from our seeds. Now, the reason why this is deeply hidden is because logically we can perceive emptiness, and we can even perceive emptiness directly. But even someone who has seen emptiness directly cannot directly correlate perfectly every single karma, cause and effect. You must be omniscient to do that, which comes after the direct perception of emptiness. And so it's deeply hidden to directly correlate exact, precise karma. So you can speak generally about causes and effects, but the deeply hidden reality is I am seeing this person in this moment of consciousness exactly because this cause. But we can recognize the truth of that. And it's hidden because it's not obvious. Obviously. Right? Like an engine is hidden in a car. It's not obvious by looking at a car that there's an engine, but it's irrefutable that the engine is the thing which makes it go. Just because you can't see the thing which makes it go doesn't mean there isn't a thing which is making it go. And we need to use logic to have that perception, which is why it's hidden, because the obvious organs of sense, the five, cannot perceive that. We must use the sense of consciousness, which is the sixth sense in the school of the school of yoga and Buddhism. We must have a direct perception through that sense organ, which in these schools is seen as being equally valid as seeing something with my eyes, as seeing something with perfect logic. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna say this bit and then we'll go into the end game. Next part of the root text. All sentient beings desire happiness and do not desire misery. Think deeply about how, in this beginningless cycle of existence, there's not one sentient being who has not been my friend and relative hundreds of times. By the way, there's an entire like 1 month course on that statement, which is beautiful. It's called ACI 5. Yeah, ACI 5. Um, our goal is not to prove that here. So put it on a shelf if you don't buy it. What you can buy though is the first statement. All sentient beings desire happiness and do not desire misery. In this way, we are all the same. In this way, we are all the same. I see you doing wacky stuff that hurts me, but what you really believe is that it'll bring you happiness because all beings desire happiness and they don't want misery. And so even though I can say, ouch, that hurt, I can deeply empathize with your very, very, very primordial desire for happiness. And I honor that. And I'm so beyond being angry at you for hurting me that what I do is I cherish and defend and work toward your achievement of that happiness which you desire, which in your misunderstanding caused you to hurt me. Because you and I are exactly the same in that way. I hurt people all kinds of ways that I really don't want to, simply because in whatever state of understanding or misunderstanding, of education or miseducation, I think that that thing will bring me happiness and will relieve me of my misery, of my suffering. And so, in the same way that I must learn to forgive myself and do the work of becoming better, I must equally forgive you and work for you and helping you to relieve yourself of misery. Because in that way, we're just one hand, and I'm a thumb and you're a forefinger. You know? But we're all just trying to do the same thing, guys. And actually, by helping you to do that is exactly the cause for me to see that be accomplished in my own life. And that is the very beginning of equanimity, which allows us to develop compassion. And we're going to get more into that next class. Therefore, since there's no ground for being attached to some and hating others, if you really investigated it, right? If you spent the time to go and see, do I really have grounds for, you know, preferring this person and hating that person? Not really. Superficially, maybe. Validly, though, as far as valid supports are concerned, no. So I shall develop a mind of equanimity toward all sentient beings. That is the logical conclusion upon that meditation. So then Kamalashila gives us a very clear directive here. Begin the meditation on equanimity by thinking of a neutral person, then consider people who are friends and foes. Okay, so we're going to spend some time doing these meditations over the coming weeks. But we have now laid the basis for these meditations here. Okay, questions? What are your questions about any of this content or anything that is irrelevant?
Not really a question, just a thank you and a comment. I've been thinking about all of this a lot because, well, I mean, just in general, but also I have some friends who are Dharma and meditation teachers and they live in Austin. And so I was checking on them after the floods and I was like, I hope you and your family are okay. And then I was like, in my mind, I'm like, wait a minute, everyone has been their mother. Everyone is just as important as everyone else. So while I'm trying to be compassionate to them, I'm like not saying Dharma. So then I was like, and everyone else affected by it. Because that's really what I
Nice.
meant. But like relatively, I was specifically saying, like, is your child okay? They weren't like at a camp on the river, were they? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And so I don't know. This has been on my mind a lot of like how, how do you express that you want everyone not to have died, everyone to be safe? but you also want to know how their mom is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is really like very helpful. Thank you.
In what way is this helpful to
It's
that,
just giving me
what
more
you
to
shared?
think about and like hearing your insights on it. And then like the root text is helping me like kind of like integrate it all.
Yeah, nice. Little pro tip on that is, and Beck, you may have heard me say this somewhere else, which is Ye- it is a very, very valid practice to take one person as the representative of all sentient beings. And so when you speak to them in your heart,
Mm,
you're speaking to all beings, but use a language which speaks to the individual. Like, are you okay? And in your heart, what you're doing is you're just simply wishing the wish,
hmm
right? Because if you were to take what you just said and you were to try to consolidate that and distill that into the smallest phrase that still holds the meaning, I would say what you're talking about is the wish,
hmm
bodhicitta. And so your language can change, but the wish is unchanging. So by me expressing this thing, it is simply one expression of that extremely profound and infinite concept of may all beings be free of suffering and may I be the being, I'm willing to work to be the being who helps make that happen, you know. Um, Because what I find, which is really great, is a lot of people who start to practice this, their language gets real wonky because they realize the power of their language and they're like, I don't know how to talk anymore, you know? And you're just like, it's like, well, I'm really grateful that you're thinking about it, but like communication is meant to be understood. So it's like, make sure that you're not confusing other people. It's really about what's your heart feeling when
Yeah.
you're saying a thing. Like, what is the belief in your heart that is behind the language that you're choosing? Are you okay? Please say that. Don't go to someone and be like, are you and all sentient beings okay? They're gonna be like, what the hell? You're like, are you my mom? But also, like, I'm your mom, like, and we've been moms. Is everyone okay? Like, just have that in your heart, but you don't need to say that. It's super
Thank you.
confusing.
Yeah, kind of like when you do Tonglen, you might think of one person, but they represent everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
because the power of meditation is aided by the power of clarity. And so by using an individual is simply to choose a focal point to then develop that concentration upon. And then once you have the essence of that, then you expand that into infinity. Like that's the vibe. Remember, there's two steps of meditation. If you took the How to Meditate class where I said you do the analytical to realize truth, and then you stop analyzing and you just embody that truth. And so to realize the truth, it helps to have a very discrete and obvious object. And then you drop the object and you just embody the truth and you just sear the image of truth into the stream of your consciousness, which is actually conflated by a specific object because the truth is beyond words and beyond definition. It's before words and it's before definition because it's infinite and definition and by definition is limited.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
Wow. Um, I couldn't write it down fast enough, but your layout of that sentence, something about that was unbelievable to me. Um, I seriously felt like I was going to cry when I was reading that. Um, I thought that was really, really interesting to break down every single bit of that sentence and like feel what's contained in each of those clauses. So,
Yeah.
um, way to really pull that one apart in a beautiful way. Um, that just wanted to say that I was going to call you afterwards if we didn't have a time to chat here. So, yeah,
Nice.
thanks for that. I feel like that's fantastic fodder to meditate on and to think about. Um,
Yeah.
and
Nice.
then one thing, this is more of just like, unless you want to speak specifically something about this, if you had some thoughts in mind. Um,
No, please continue.
yeah,
I appreciate your appreciation.
the other one was just sort of a small insight into sort of my, um, if you go to the,
Oh,
well, you can do this live if you want to, but thinking about sentient beings, emptiness, and seeds, and sort of the obvious realities. For some reason, it came to me how you've met my mom before. So, Becky, my mom she's from Kentucky. She's the sweetest woman in the world. She can be friends with anyone. She could talk to a wall and have a blast. She's great. I love her so much. Um, but I noticed sort of the way that and I learned from her to connect with other people and to make people feel comfortable. It's appreciating a sort of a slightly deeper level than others might normally in casual conversation see and to love them, but then to really not dive too deeply into the true nature of them and not gaze too deeply into who they are, what they are. And for some reason, I like learned, not for some reason, obviously, that's my caregiver, right? You learn a lot from them and how they perceive others and talk to others. So the idea of like really seeing and perceiving someone for their emptiness and for their unchanged, for their ability to change is like, it kind of pushes against the grading of like how I learned how to socialize with people. And my wife understood this because my mom will be like, oh, Lauren is this way, or oh, Lauren
Oh.
likes that, or Lauren likes this. And it drives my wife crazy. But for some reason, that's something that was just somewhat natural to me to like maybe think in that way. And it's an interesting dip below sort of like the social conditioning that I've had to really acknowledge that, yeah, you're suffering right now, or you're this way, you're doing well right now, but there's the impermanence to that feeling and that perception in you.
Yeah.
It's just like a comment that something about that really resonated with me. It's something I'm gonna be thinking about.
Man, I love that. To be seen by those eyes is a form of liberation. It's one of the kindest things that my teachers have ever done to me is to see me that way. As soon as someone says, "Oh, you're X," you're like, "Oh," like, and then if you're not strong-willed, you're like, "You're right," and now you're locked into something that is so not consistent with the truth of reality, which is that all things change, right? Even to go from the expression of that label now to the expression of the label now is still a change, right? Even if the label might still apply, like I have a beard. I also have a beard right now. But for you to say Bob always has a beard just creates this super weird thing where it's like now I'm gonna be like, yeah, I want to shave my beard today. And I'm like, wait, but like so many people are like, Bob has a beard, and I'm like, but I also believe that I always have a beard. If I shave my beard, will I no longer be me? And it just throws you into this like super weird place where all of your being is in attachment. Whereas the truth of you is that the purest form of you is in complete non-attachment. That's the definition of freedom. That's the definition of liberation, is that, you know, even the state of there's connection and there's attachment. Like I can be connected deeply, but not attached, right? It's like van der Waals forces, versus like uh, you know. So anyway, like a covalent bond. It's dangerous when Paul comes, because then I start getting sciencey. Uh, and
Yeah,
so like
it's amazing how perceptive Lauren is to that difference. And she and I probably wouldn't have put it within that framework, but now that I'm
yeah,
hearing this framework, it's like so um it's interesting how much deeper it is than just sort of like her being nice and southern and being like wanting to be familiar, right? She does that because she wants to be familiar with you,
right,
right? So there's like that like bit of attachment that sort of goes to
yeah,
that idea.
yeah. And I also think that what you said is really important. I'd like to just highlight what you just said, which is it's very easy for me to become judgmental of judgmentalism. So like I would call that judgmental and like you are this way. Like I'm judging you and then I'm labeling you. And then I'll be like, meh. But what you just said is like it's because she loves you. that's why she does it. And so all of a sudden, now we can even saying that she is that way, I just did the same thing. And so it's
Hmm.
like, but what is the truth of that? And I find that it's so much easier to forgive and to be present with people when we try to look at their heart's intention, which if you keep on going further and further and further, you get to that statement that I paused on, which is all beings desire happiness and to avoid misery. And so it's just like, it's just how my mom understands how to be happy and how to give happiness and how to avoid misery. And then the X factor is the education of like, is that thing actually working or not? Right? But the motivation, I think, is a really sweet motivation. And I choose to connect at that universalizing motivation that all people have. Even the people who hurt me directly, I understand actually exactly what they want because all beings want that same exact thing. And so I'm going to meet you in that space. And it's just such a good place to meet people. You can't help but forgive people when you're in that space. And then, and like Geshe Michael teaches, I forgive you in advance. Like the definition of a relationship in samsara. Like if I am in samsara, which is, like the world of suffering. Like if I'm in cycles of suffering, if I'm not an enlightened being, the definition of a relationship includes hurting each other. That's just that's just it, man. Like until we're through, until we're paramitad, until we cross the other side of the ocean, like the nature of reality is suffering. So don't worry. I've already forgiven you. And if you're in that space of understanding the equanimity of that through thread that all beings do whatever the hell they do, however misguided. Which by the way, this helped me really work through loved ones in my world who have addiction. Because I'm like, I'm the same freaking person. The only reason they're doing this is because they want happiness. How could I blame them? You know, they're just trying to avoid pain. Like you talk to people who have addictions, and one of the most common things that they say is, I just want the narrator to shut the hell up in my mind, and I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, dude, I'm the same way. You know? But the method that we've chosen is perhaps different, but the motive is exactly the same. So I'm endeavoring to do that through things like meditation and yoga and, these different methods of like becoming the master of my mind. But I don't blame you for wanting that thing because it's the same thing that I want. And I've learned a lot, and I've been misguided a lot, and I'm working on it, and we're exactly the same. So it's this really beautiful, beautiful way. So that's so now that we're here in that state of equanimity, right? Like I call you thumb and I call me first finger, but like, guys, where's your hand? The thing that is the same about us is that we want the same thing, all of us. So let me help you get that. And so that's compassion because we're all suffering, And so let's help each other. Let's take action on that. So how do we do that? And how do we cultivate that as something that we can like carry with us all day long? That's the purpose of our meditation, is to first understand the nature of it and the truth of it, and then to begin to habituate our mind around the habits which embody that. Because it's one thing to desire it, but then you're like, what the hell do I do about it? So that's what we're here to learn how to do and to carry into every aspect of our life. And that is
Very
time, my
cool.
friends. Meditation assignment for the week is to investigate those three aspects on the sentient being of your choice. So, and pick the same person all week. Like, don't jump objects. Like, pick one person and say, do I understand? Like, can I have compassion for this being at the level of the sentient being? I see them suffer and I wish that they don't. at the level of emptiness, I have that same desire, yet I'm understanding their emptiness, which means that I am with their capacity to change. And ultimately, I understand that they came from me. And so I am in a state of compassion with their suffering, understanding that these are images which originated from my mind, from my heart. I could never blame them for their suffering if I really understood emptiness, cause and effect. And then once you've analyzed those three, just sit in that space. Just sit in the space. Stop analyzing. Just sit. Whatever truth you uncovered in your investigation, just sit in that truth for a while. And see how your mind changes over a week. 100% guaranteed something will change. I can't tell you what, but if you did this meditation, you'd see it. So tell me about it next week.
Just curious, Bob, if you don't mind a quick question on that one. When you're saying really think about investigate the three aspects of those,
Yeah.
is that something you do on the front end of the meditation, like very consciously and like cognitively and like experientially? Or is that something that you set like an intention for at the beginning and then
Yeah.
like perhaps that's a very basic question, but I'm just curious
No,
if you have any
perfect question.
suggestions on how to approach that.
Yeah, so if you have the framework of the preliminaries, for example, what you do is after you've done the accumulating good energy and ameliorating or getting rid of bad energy. So that's like so you bring a teacher to mind, prostrate, confession, rejoicing, ask for teachings, meditate.
Mhm.
And then at the end you say, please keep teaching me, dedication. And so when I say meditate, what I mean is what we just talked about, like those three things. And
Mhm.
so you can do the preliminaries as a 3 hour meditation, honestly, honest to God. And it's amazing. But if your purpose is not to do that, then just very quickly go through. You're like, Bodhicitta Refuge, teacher, wow, I love you. You're so great. You know what I mean? Like, oops, I did this thing, my bad. But check out this great thing. Woohoo. Okay, please teach me. I'm willing to receive teachings. And carry that. I'm willing to receive teachings into the meditation. You say, and now I'll meditate. So it'll take you like 3 minutes to do those preliminaries. And now spend, 15, 20 minutes on the meditation that those preliminaries were preliminary to. And so then what you do is you say, okay, now that I'm like embodied, I've arrived. I did my stretches before I did my marathon. And I bring the object to mind. I bring my wife to mind. I see my wife as a suffering being in this way. Let me understand. Let me just be with that suffering in a heart that is just like, fuck, man, I do anything to not see this. You know what I mean? Like I do anything, Like I do anything, really. Like I promise I would. If I knew what to do, I'd fucking do it. Okay. Now that I'm there, then you go, what is the actual truth of my wife or of my partner or whatever? The nature of them is that they're not fixed. They're empty. They can change. Is that true? Check it out. Is it true? Prove it. Like go through it. Well, yeah, of course it's true. Look, from the day that I met her to today, she's changed so much. So of course she can change. Her nature is change. There's nothing fixed about my wife or my partner. And then once you're there, kind of lock it in. Ah, yeah, I think I see things as they are. Great. Now, seeds. Therefore, I understand that the image of my wife is just an image arising in my mind and covering the parts that I call wife. And that perception is a result. That result comes from a cause. Do I believe that? Why do I believe that? Bake it in. What could be the cause of this result? Reflect. Understand the quality of the result. Identify the quality of the cause as a reflection of the result. And now, in this space, I'm just going to sit in this space where I'm holding this whole. Just bake it in. And then, out of that, you make your resolution. So, out of this realization, I will bring that into my life through the resolution of embodying that truth. As a very specific example of that, it looks like this. Whatever it was. And now I'm going to go live a life of causes, you know? And then that heart then will carry, hopefully will carry with you all day long, not just towards your wife, but you have a very clear action plan of how to be a spiritual warrior today. Of like, I'm gonna go be extra whatever kind in this kind of way. I'm gonna protect life in a special way today. I'm gonna make sure people feel seen in a certain kind of way. Whatever the antidote of that suffering is, be that thing in the world today. And then if you just even have that one focal point, then the whole rest of the world, kind of becomes consistent with that attitude. Does that help?
Oh yeah, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, rock on. Oh, and then I'm so sorry. Then you dedicate. You say, teachers, please stay. And then may all the benefits that I have from this meditation that I just did, I dedicate it to everybody. Like I give it away. I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for us. And then you're done your meditation.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks for the question. All right. Thank you guys for coming today. Slides will be up on the platform. Paul, if you want that, let me know, and I'll catch you soon.
Sure
Peace.
thing. See you. Nice to meet you, Becky.